Yes, this appeal was put in by...
Can you come to the microphone, please?
I'm Amigail Gibbons. I'm president of the Friends of Bap City group, and we've elected, Joseph Reistorf has graciously agreed to deliver this appeal coming from the entire group, Friends of Bap City. Thank you, Joseph.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Reistorf. I live at 12288 Gail Lane. I'm not a long-term resident of Bap City, so I can't really speak with the passion and the emotion that probably a lot of the other speakers have, but perhaps I can provide a little bit of perspective. In my real life, I work as an environmental consultant for cities and counties around the state, primarily on various types of recycling projects. But I also work for some private developers who are interested in developing different types of recycling and composting projects. And in that capacity, I've spent a lot of time on this side of the table in various planning commission meetings, public hearings, city council meetings, and it really gained a perspective of what it takes to get a project through. I think it was Gary in his comments mentioned when he was discussing the variance issue, talked about how the cities and counties typically make it very difficult to get a variance for the very simple reason that they're trying to preserve the integrity and the character of their communities. That's been my experience, and I've had several opportunities, occurrences where I've had to tell clients that I advise them not to proceed with a variance application because the bar was just too high, that no matter how much they wanted it and how much they thought they could make their case, it didn't meet the criteria set in the city zoning code, and that's the case here. But before I go on, I just wanted to kind of back up a little bit. First of all, thank you for providing this series of meetings for the next 3 nights, and also agreeing to go ahead with the hearings tonight, despite the fact that your legal counsel has advised you that there might be a different alternative, a different approach. But when you look around the community, it's clear that you and your predecessors and the people that have lived here for the last 50 to 100 years have really taken good care of this community. They've worked hard to preserve its character, to make it really stand out. I've sent postcards, copies of videotapes and so forth to relatives that I had in other parts of the country, and they've just always been amazed at the beauty and the character of this place and how it stands out from a lot of other communities. Given that though, when you look around and see how well the community's been preserved, it really raises the question, well, how did we get here tonight? How did this project get this far in the process? And I think there are a number of serious flaws that have occurred up to this point that have allowed that to happen. In preparing our appeal, we spent a lot of time going through the documents in the record, looking at the process, looking at the procedure, and we really saw 3 primary reasons why this project should be denied. First is that there are a series of procedural errors that in total make it difficult, if not impossible, for the Planning Commission to have made and reached an informed decision about the potential environmental and community impacts of the project. The second is that the environmental review conducted by the city was inadequate and failed to consider all of the potential environmental impacts of the project. And the third primary reason is that the Planning Commission approved variances for the project without making any of the necessary findings or determinations required by the zoning code, and without complete details on the project's scope, design, and layout. These are all fatal flaws, and I hope you can consider all the arguments that have been made tonight. I think everybody spoke quite eloquently, and I'll attempt not to be repetitious, but maybe just to highlight some of the things that I think are some of the most significant issues that we should consider. With regard to the procedural errors, the CEQA guidelines, and in fact your own policies that you've established for processing CEQA documents are fairly clear about how projects should be analyzed and processed. It talks about a pre-application phase, an application phase, and then an analysis phase. What's really happened here, and I think this is probably a characteristic that can get applied to everything that's happened up to this point, and that was really a rush to judgment. There just seemed to be a lot of impetus to move this project forward before all the details of the project were known. And that, I think, it can be evidenced by the fact that on the very night that it was presented before the Planning Commission for final action, new site plans, new changes to the design were still being presented. And even though the Planning Commission approved architectural review, there really weren't any architectural details to be approved. They simply deferred that decision later to a committee, and that is simply not good planning. Approving decisions, making decisions, and granting approvals when the details that are coming in the future just almost always leads to bad decisions. It was just amazing to me to see how far the project had moved forward in the process before an application had even been filed. Your own guidelines and CEQA guidelines talk about very specific events that are supposed to occur in the process. One of which is the actual submittal of an application, and that's actually a significant event because it sets a couple of clocks in motion. The amount of time that a city or a county has for issuing a letter of completion, completing the initial study, for actually eventually coming to a decision on the project. That event never occurred. The advisory review committee made a decision on the type of environmental document that would be required before even receiving an application from the applicant, and before many of the supporting documents and studies that were to go along with the project were presented. There was absolutely no basis for making that decision, and that early in the process. During the Planning Commission meeting, several issues were brought up that were addressed partially in some of the documentation up to that point. Traffic, water supplies, adequacy of public services. And many of those issues, it was clear that there weren't any answers yet. It was amazing to me to see the Planning Commission in direct conflict to some of the advice given to them by the city staff to approve the project. The city engineer made it quite clear that he didn't believe that there was adequate water pressure to meet the needs of the project, and he couldn't determine that what impacts that the project would have on the water supply for the surrounding communities. Yet the Planning Commission simply ignored that advice and moved forward with approval of the project. Those, I think, are some of the serious flaws of the approval process. We hope that you will certainly consider the advice of the legal counsel and recognize that the environmental review of the project was inadequate, and that you really need to kind of go back to the beginning and start over. But I think you have to kind of look at if you go through the process, where will you end up? What should really be done at this point is have the developer present to you the final design and details of the project. Up to this point, it's been a moving target with details constantly being changed and new submittals being given throughout the process. Once that's done, then a comprehensive and thorough initial study using the checklist and your own guidelines should be completed. At that point, there's no doubt that the likely decision will be to do a full EIR. The EIR will be prepared, subject to public review, comments submitted, and so forth. And then we would be back here where we are tonight, which is still trying to see if a project that is incompatible with the character of the city, too large for the site, should move forward. And that gets back to the final point of our argument, which is that the variances which were provided by the city, which were approved by the Planning Commission, were approved without any justifications or findings made that are in the zoning code. This morning I picked up a copy of the approval letter that the city recently sent to the developer after the Planning Commission meeting. That's the letter dated May 14th. In the initial staff report, on the sections that dealt with the variances, there really were no attempt at all was made to provide any type of justification. That area of the staff report was simply left blank. The wording that was provided in the approval letter, based on the Planning Commission's action that was sent to the developer, stated that special circumstances applicable to the property include the topography due to previous use as a hydraulic mine site, and that to apply a strict standard to this applicant would reduce
his utilization of the property from potential as many as 80 units down to 24 creates a hardship which is inordinate compared to other people's properties and would preclude any type of affordable housing. There's no justification for that statement, and in fact it implies that it's the city's responsibility to guarantee developers full utilization of their property regardless of what it takes to achieve that full utilization. In this case, massive grading, construction of retaining walls, and encroachment on seasonal streams and wetlands. That isn't what the purpose of the zoning code is, and that comes nowhere near providing any type of justification. Several of the other speakers have indicated the topography of this area consists of a variety of slopes, 30%, some greater, some natural, some man-made. And we live with those slopes. That's the character of the community in which we live. We construct homes, we construct buildings, roads, and so forth to deal with those. We don't come in and level them and then try to just so we can maximize use of the property. That isn't a right of any property owner, and it's not consistent in any way or supported by anything in the zoning code or the general plan. The same has to do with the variance granted for the setback from the seasonal stream. Again, no justification or substantiation was provided in the staff report or in the planning commission's findings. So the net result will be that if you decide that the project really needs a thorough environmental review, which it has not had up to now, and that you submitted to that, you'll be back here and you'll still have a project that will require some significant variances to be approved, and the findings for those will not be there. No new information is going to come forward that will substantiate that, and it's all likelihood that during the course of conducting a full environmental impact report, additional environmental flaws and significant impacts of the project will be identified. We just heard a very interesting presentation regarding the historical impact of the project. One of the things that was not done with the initial study and proposed negative declaration for the project was that it was not sent to the state clearinghouse. There are the characteristics of the project, because it has impacts that fall into the jurisdiction of various state agencies, require it under the CEQA statutes that it should have been sent to the public clearinghouse. It's a very convenient way of making sure that the projects that have real significance are reviewed by the appropriate state agencies. If it had been sent to the state clearinghouse, a letter that was received from the Office of Historic Preservation of the Department of Parks and Recreation dated May 21st, after the Planning Commission hearing took place, would have been received and put in the record so that it could have been considered prior to anybody making a decision on this. And this letter pointed out several significant factors that should have been considered regarding the historical impact of the site. And I'll just quote briefly. This is a letter from Dr. Knox Mellon. He's a State Historic Preservation Officer. He says, the 1988 amendments to the CEQA guidelines also include a stricter definition of what constitutes substantial adverse changes to a historical resource, and therefore what constitutes a significant effect on the environment in relation to historical resources. The guidelines now state, quote, substantial adverse change in the significance of a historical resource means physical demolition, destruction, relocation, or alteration of the resource or its immediate surroundings, such that the significance of the historical resource will be materially impaired. That describes exactly what the plan is for this site. In summary, we encourage you to take the advice of the legal counsel and recognize that the environmental review that was conducted with this project is woefully inadequate. It left many issues unaddressed. The traffic issue, while some of the impacts were identified, there was absolutely no mitigation provided. That issue was just dropped and left there. As other speakers have pointed out, by approving this project, you're increasing the population of the city by over 10% with one simple approval. There's really been no analysis of whether the city's infrastructure and public services can accommodate this. And thirdly, the variances that are required to make this project happen cannot be substantiated. There's no evidence in the record. There's no indication that even if we did a full environmental impact report and came back 4 to 6 months from now, that any new information would come forward that would help you substantiate the granting of the variances. So we ask you to overturn the Planning Commission's approvals of this project and to help maintain the character of our community. Thank you.
Joseph Reistorf. Are you aware that the letter you referenced from the state was in response to an inquiry on a residential piece of property, not on this project?
It's not clear in there what actually prompted the letter. However, I think that the tone of the letter and the way in which he characterized the impacts would certainly apply to this project.
But just so everybody is clear, that's not a letter sent from the state in response to any inquiry on this project. And in fact, I was with the city planner when a call was made to that office to clarify that point. It was made, that inquiry was made relative to private residences on Boulder Street.
Thank you. And my point of bringing it up is the fact that if the negative declaration for the project had been submitted to the state clearinghouse, this type of letter probably would have been served as part of the normal review of the project.
You mentioned a letter from the city on the justification for the climate approval. What was that again?
I was quoting earlier from the
Letter from the commission.
it's the standard approval letter that the planning commission sends to the developer after action by the planning commission, and it's dated May 14, 2001.
It's this one right here.
And it includes the final findings that were adopted by the planning commission.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we start with the minutes, we get about a 5-minute break just to stretch our legs.
You mean the literal signs.
Well, I'd like to commend the eight appellants. Worked out to exactly 2 hours, which is what the designated amount of time was, so thank you very much. We will now then hear the rebuttals. So, Victor, are you speaking for? Garrett. Okay. And again, and you're going to be speaking in rebuttal to the site plan. Okay, keep in mind the 15 minutes.
Gary Johnson, 210 Drummond Street, Nevada City. This will be brief because the reasons for the rebuttal are very simple. The site plan was not approved by the Planning Commission because the city engineer, the Planning Commission, and the public never had a chance to review the plan that was put before the Planning Commissioners for a vote. So, further, this site plan was not in the Planning Commissioners' packets, nor was it available for study by the city engineer in advance of the May 10th meeting. I believe that it was received at the city on May 7th. That was after the packets were sent out, and it just wasn't available. So it seems presumptuous on the part of the developer to even expect the passage of this document with no review. I was amazed that it seemed like they just waltzed in here and dropped one in front of each planning commissioner, and with the expectation that it would be approved. Further, after a full-size site plan, of which I'm going to ask Victor to hold up. After a full-size site plan was submitted for the required amount of time, one that you can actually lay out on a table and read, they came in with this little 11 by 17 size, reduced size document, and dropped it in front of everybody and had the expectation that they would be able to vote on that. So it just seems incredible that we could even consider that approval could even, or that the developer could even consider that the approval could possibly happen. And what in fact actually happened, is that the site plan wasn't denied. What happened was that the modifications to the previously submitted site plan were not approved, because that's what the new site plan was modifications to the site plan that they had reviewed. So how could they approve a site plan that they hadn't really seen? They certainly couldn't approve it by looking at it for a couple of minutes. So I urge you to uphold the decision of the Planning Commission and deny the appeal. Thank you. And if there's anyone else who wants to use some of this time from our group to add any additional information, then I will defer the rest of my time to them. Thank you.
I would just to even make more clear what Gary's talking about here, is that the developer came up and spoke earlier during their appeal and said they don't understand what they're really supposed to point at because there wasn't a recommendation. Well, that's really because they were putting heavy pressure on the Planning Commission not to ask for a continuance for another 2 weeks because then they missed their June 15th deadline. And what the Planning Commission really should have done was said, we don't have enough time, not enough information to look at this new site plan, so let's have a continuance. But of course, if they'd done that, there goes their funding. And so Harry Stewart and the other commissioners, in a sense, didn't pass it because there wasn't enough information there, when really what they should have done was just ask for a continuance, but that's not something the developer would have wanted.
I do have one more brief comment that I forgot to mention, and that is that the developer got up a few moments ago, Mr. Spann, or the developer's representative, and said that the changes to the new site plan were minimal. That was his word. And he also said that they were not substantial. We went from 50,000 cubic yards of grading to 18,000 cubic yards of grading. I would call that substantial. Thank you.
And there was no grading plan with that new site plan.
Okay, Mr. Spann,
Actually, number two is actually the city planner's rebuttal, I believe.
Oh, that's true. I'm sorry, my mistake.
I guess this is to be well, I did write, council members, a memo to you in which I discussed some of the issues that were mentioned by Mr. Pemberton. I think one of the concerns that I've heard this evening, the greatest concerns, was the processing of the CEQA document and whether CEQA was followed or not. And in a sense that there was a rush to judgment. We had a preliminary application meeting in December, and that was with the full staff. And we decided to go the mitigated negative declaration route at that point in time, and that's what we did. We heard this evening from council that a project of this type, or what's been disclosed since then, has been looks like we might be in BIR territory, and that seems to have come as a result of this. But at that time, we had spent 3 years working on this site. We had already approved 2 projects on this site, parcel map on this site, road alignment on this site. Our knowledge from the staff point of view was pretty thorough about this site. There was some things we didn't know. We asked for a large group of studies to be done. Studies came in, they were reviewed, they went back for revamping. For instance, the original traffic study said used a model of 6 trips per unit, and per day, and we changed that to 10 trips per day because we felt that would be more realistic. So we made an attempt through our peer review to have real good objective studies. There's a lot of there's question about the January 22nd ARC, and I can understand that, and there's been some quotations of the CEQA guidelines. And I do understand that when an application comes in, a clock starts ticking, you have to have a CEQA document done by a certain amount of days. That's required by a public agency. I'm not sure we have a CEQA expert here, or you can jump in any time, but what I read in CEQA is that you can begin the CEQA process earlier. And that's what we were attempting to do this, to make a better application than what we thought we were going to receive. In my memo, I did quote what I was relying on. That was CEQA guidelines, section 15004D. And I've got that here in front of me. And so you can, this was what the decision was based on for that January 22nd ARC. CEQA guidelines say this: choosing the precise time for CEQA compliance involves a balancing of competing factors. EIRs and negative declarations should be prepared as early as feasible in the planning process to enable environmental considerations to influence project program and design, but yet late enough to provide meaningful information for environmental assessment. With private projects, the lead agency shall encourage the project proponent to incorporate environmental considerations into project conceptualization, design, and planning at the earliest feasible time. That's what we're attempting to do. And we made a shot at it. The results are what they are. The CEQA document that the Planning Commission approved, as we said before, is not that document. It was a document that was prepared and approved by ARC after the application was deemed complete. So I think that's probably enough on that. Now, to some of the specifics of Mr. Pemberton's appeal, the question of whether staff is working on behalf of the applicant. Well, the file speaks for itself, and on that score, he mentioned a letter that was written to the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee. That's a letter that was never sent out. It was shelved. It was a zoning verification letter that was requested. It was shelved because of the September meeting that the City Council had. So we were waiting until you made your decision on whether to send that out. It was never sent out. The letter to the Home Administration. That was the letter. It was an informational letter that was requested. Now, as city planner, I provide letters all week long to anyone who asks for it that concerns public information. And on request, I send letters verifying zoning and project information and planning procedures. And they go to title companies and public agencies and developers and all kinds of people. And where I get my information is from our ordinances, our resolutions, our planning processes, and the project information that applicants supply me with. Now, at the time that letter was written, we had not received our preliminary site plan, we had not received our application. So I asked Mr. Span what his application would involve. And he said it would involve site plan and architecture approval, and there'd be no discretionary approvals asked for, no variances requested. That's what I put in that informational letter about the zoning. This is what the project is going to be, or will be, put in the future text. When I read the letter now, I go, well, in retrospect, I should have been clear about where the information came from, but that explains what that letter is. That was something that, had come up. There's a letter about a revitalization zone. That letter I'd never seen before a couple weeks ago. It was never circulated to staff, at least not to me, and it never was on the city council agenda. So that was news to me that letter was in the file. But I do remember Mr. Span calling me and asking me if I would be, he expressed the ideas in that revitalization zone. This was several months ago. And I remember advising him that it was extremely unlikely the city council would want to have a revitalization zone for a project that has not even been approved, not even no application has even been submitted yet. And so I suggested that if you wanted to pursue this idea, to contact some other land use planner. And I suggested Nevada City Engineering was on retainer at that time, and their land use planner, Andy Casano, might be one person you might consider since they were involved in this project at that point. And then I immediately told the city manager about that conversation. So that's all there is to that letter. There was a question about the ARC meeting. As you know, as I mentioned before, we did have a public noticing snafu. It was the first week in the new city hall, and we didn't have the agenda board up. But that doesn't justify a mistake. A mistake was made, and to that end, I have had discussions with the city clerk, and we discussed how staff procedures can improve so a mistake like that would never happen again. There was a question about Brown Act discussion at the ARC meeting on January 22nd. And what that was when I do recall that conversation when Commissioner Stewart left the meeting, and he left the meeting for several reasons. I caught Jim Anderson, he was in the building. I asked the city attorney if the chair could make a substitution without a violation of the Brown Act. He said he could. So Ruth Bolter stepped in, took his place, and that's what we were talking about when the tape started. Let's see. The question of the fees being collected is another question that's come up. On December 7th, I wrote to AHBC that this is a quote: "The bid application must include the application fee. Based on the preliminary site plan, the application will require environmental review for a 13-acre site, $1,050. Now, in the move from the New York hotel to the city hall, this is the only thing I can think of. With all that was going on, we didn't collect it in a timely manner. And but before the Planning Commission agenda was set for April 26th, we reviewed all the fees at the staff level, and certain fees were due, and that was the fee that was due. And Mr. Span wrote a check for the amount. And since then, I've discussed with the city manager and the city clerk and office clerk how we'll improve procedures there so that we don't let a mistake like that happen again. But if it was a mistake, that's what happened. And I would say that's about it. Mr. Pemberton brought up the American Institute of Certified Planners, and yes, I am a member, and I do subscribe to their code of ethics. And I do believe that if you review the record, that if anybody reviews the record, that it'll show that I've tried to process this application in the interest of the public good, and to bring it in front of the decision makers that have to make the decision, and done my job as professionally as it called for. And so that's pretty much my statement on those issues.
Okay, thank you. I have one quick question, if I could, Gary. We had a letter from Mr. Span to the city that was never distributed, and I asked Lee how he got it, and he said he asked for everything and he got it. Did I hear you say correctly that Lee has made reference to a letter that you never even mailed?
Yes, but yes, but it was in the file. You made reference to the letter, to the text.
How did you obtain a letter that was never mailed?
It was in the file.
The original was in the file because I never mailed it, so I never made a copy. I just stuck the original in there in case it was going to be used someday.
So, question for the city attorney, you don't have to answer immediately, but at what point does a document become a public document? At what point is it a contemplated public document?
I don't think I'm going to give you a good answer on that one. Basically, the rule is if it's still in the draft form and it's being circulated, it's not a public document. But I've never gotten into this permutation of it's a letter that never got mailed, I'm unsure of it's a public document at the time, I'm sure.
I'd be interested in a, not tonight, but I'd be interested in your opinion at some point on that.
It's a signed letter. Do I get a chance to comment? If that was a request to me, do I get a chance to comment?
You had your say, and now he had his say.
No, I think there was some discussion we could about this, wasn't there? I mean, with the others?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now, Mr. Span, representatives from AHBC.
There are a number of appeals, what order am I regarding? Are you taking one at a time, or what's your pleasure?
Are you planning, do you think you'll need 15 minutes on each one?
Probably not. Maybe a little longer on some than others.
Well, then, if you have a copy of the agenda in front of you.
Yeah, I can just go down it as,
Starting at letter C.
addendum B, variances. No?
Oh, yes, it's at B, right?
B, yes, that's right. In response to addendum B variances, there are special circumstances applicable to the subject property. The 30% slopes can be not natural. No other property in the vicinity of the site has this unique man-made feature.
Mine does.
This sets this site apart from all other natural slope conditions. The same variance was applied for by Prestige Care Facility on the subject property using same hardship justifications and was approved by the city. A significant portion of the site will be lost to development if steep slope variances, if a steep slope variance is not approved. With regard, in addition to that, the issue of variance is such that this site has two streams flowing through it. And without the ability to cross those streams, virtually, well, I'd say over 50% of the property would be unattainable. You can't get to it, you can't develop it. Now, if that's the city's pleasure, then there's your decision. But it clearly hinders anyone's ability, whether it's for affordable housing or for high-price housing or multifamily, single-family, commercial, whatever. If you can't get to the land, you cannot develop it. And that's clearly a hardship on whoever, whether you own it or you're in contract to acquire it or whatever the case may be. If you can't get to it, you can't develop it. So clearly there's a hardship right there alone in just being able to reach the property. And just to reiterate the 30% slope issue, and I heard someone say that they have a similar situation. I cannot dispute that. I don't know if it was a mining site as well, but I know that we are on a mining site and that these conditions were man-made. I don't think that was the intent of the ordinance. I believe the intent of the ordinance was to protect the hillsides. This is a devastated piece of property. I know there's history behind the mining operation, but the results of the mining operation, obliterated this land. With regards to addendum C, tree removal permit. Though some trees are being removed, they will be replaced 2 to 1, leaving the site with more trees after development than exist now. Special attention will be given to tree placement to provide maximum screening to neighboring properties. Scenic corridor. Our project design and landscape plan have focused specifically to comply with the scenic corridor ordinance. Low, single-story structures have been utilized to minimize any visual effect on the corridor. Tree retention and heavy landscape screening along the corridor are incorporated in our landscape plan. In response to procedural issues, addendum E, number 1. City staff Actually, what I prepared was response to the items as they were indicated in the appeal. So with regards to procedural issues, I felt that the city did need to respond to some of the questions that were asked, and I think Paul has pretty much addressed those. But I did want to indicate that we did pay an initial fee of $560 in October, and additional fees were paid upon request by staff. The mitigated negative declaration was granted on the basis that sufficient documentation was provided. Mitigation conditions have been placed on the project that will assure that the identified environmental issues requiring further investigation will be analyzed and mitigated prior to the issuance of a grading permit or building permit. Revisions to site and grading plans were minimal. At the May 10th meeting, what was submitted in terms of the changes to the site plan I'd addressed and responded to previously, they were very minor changes to the footprints of a few buildings to remove them from the stream bed setback. As a matter of fact, at this point, the only portions of the development that affect the stream bed setback is one corner of the parking lot area in just one location, and the bridge crossings over the stream beds. And in the case of those bridge crossings, they will be free span. There will be no structures, no disturbance to the creek bed whatsoever. But those bridge spans will be crossing over the 25-foot setback area. The adjustments are beneficial to protect the sensitive nature of the seasonal stream beds. By making these changes, the only encroachments of the stream beds are the two bridges, which will be free span and spanning and will not have an impact on the stream beds. Though further studies and reviews are being required at later dates, the importance of these studies will not be diminished in any way. Unless the city concurs that all conditions have been met, the project will not receive a grading and/or building permit. The purpose of deferring these studies is a common practice in the development of real estate in California. The intent of this practice is to allow the project to receive ample review and conditional approval, then to allow the developers to secure project financing prior to paying considerable expense for engineering, working drawings, and other studies that will ultimately require the city's approval. Addendum F with regards to housing element. The city's housing element is not in substantive compliance with the state of California. Anyone can call the Department of Housing and Community Development to verify this fact. Nevada City does have a responsibility to promote adequate housing opportunities for all segments of the community's housing needs. We would not be taking financial risk involved in developing this project if there wasn't a need. Our marketing information reflects a need far greater than the proposed PD is. In response to the Friends of Nevada City appeal, here again I'm going to address as the items were identified in their appeal A through M. A. Hardship justification for steep slope variance was provided to the Planning Commission. The proposed site steep slopes are man-made, not natural. Mine-tailings left over from past mining operations have devastated the site's topography. Development of the site at any reasonable density will require variances to the steep slope ordinance. It should be noted that the previously approved Prestige Care Facility received the same variances on the very same site. This is not a similar site or a similar piece of property that a variance was requested on. This is the very same site. Placement of the water tank has been altered prior to the Planning Commission hearing. The present location is screened by existing vegetation from Highway 49 and Broad Street. The addition of landscaping will add to the screening of the water tank. No visual impact will be caused by this improvement. Permission for clearing natural vegetation has been given in the form of mitigating measures pertaining to site distance visibility from Highway 49 onto Broad Street. The project site has proper zoning and general plan designation. The allowable density far exceeds the density proposed for the project. Seeking variances does not negate the project's consistency with the city's general plan. D, trees being removed will be replaced with new trees at a ratio of 2 to 1. This is a replacement factor generally found acceptable in most other jurisdictions. Furthermore, thinning of thick, dense stands of ponderosa pines is thought to be a good foresting practice, which enables selected trees to thrive. The project can be served, the project can be served by the city's water system. We have proposed mitigation measures to adequately address water and sewer system improvements that will more than adequately cover the project's impact on these systems. What I mean by that is that we have recently written a letter to the city manager and asked for it to be distributed to the city council, offering our contribution to make improvements to off-site water and sewer line improvements in the city. These improvements have recently been communicated to us as a need by Public Works Director. And upon hearing those results, we have made this offer. And we have also made, the offer is twofold. One dealing with sewer, and that is that through the process of the application, we had paid for Cranmer Engineering to give us a report on what kind of off-site sewer improvement needs would be required for the project. And they had indicated that a gravity flow line would be required to be improved and to the extent of roughly about $100,000 of cost. At that time, that was the chosen way to go and is still the recommended way to go in the mitigated negative declaration. The letter that I had submitted to the city manager reflected that there is an alternative, and that would be to pump sewage up to Broad Street and make improvements to Broad Street. Those off-site improvements for the Broad Street connection is far, far less than what the other improvements would be required as identified in the Cranmer report. By our now being required to put in a sewage holding system, which will require a pumping station and emergency generator in case of blackouts. This now opens up the alternative to pumping to Broad Street and saving perhaps as much as $70,000 in off-site sewer line improvements. The offer that I made to the city manager was that if the city chose to have the Broad Street improvements made as opposed to the other gravity flow improvements, that we would contribute to the city the difference of that savings, that approximate $70,000, presuming that that is the number, to the city to make improvements in other sewer lines throughout the city that may be causing infiltration of storm water into the sewer system. So we felt that that was a very fair and adequate way of dealing with some of the problems that the city is dealing with in their sewer system at this time. We also agreed to make a contribution of up to $50,000 for off-site water improvements. And this is over and above all the improvements and all the work that we're going to do on site with regards to the right. This is in addition to putting in the hydromatic pump station on site and enlarging our water holding tank as required or as discussed with the city manager previously. So we think that we're making ample contributions to the city system to deal with existing problems that go beyond the need of our complex.
Excuse me, Bill, before you, because you're going to be there a while, before you move on. But when was this letter sent to the city?
This was sent, and I just asked, get copies for distribution. The date was June 7th.
I'm sorry?
June 7th.
June 7th. Okay. We don't.
No, you did not. I've indicated, I gave that letter to, I don't think that letter is in your packet.
Yeah.
Okay, it was just put on.
No, I did.
I gave the letter to the city engineer.
Oh, that was okay.
Item number F was referring to will serve letters, and to my knowledge, the city staff has not requested or required that we collect will serve letters for the project. G, it is common practice to grant mitigated negative declarations on projects that require studies and documentation, as long as the needed studies and documentation are provided and approved by the responsible local government agencies prior to issuance of a building permit or grading permit. The material provided to staff and the Planning Commission was sufficient for them to make a decision on the project's architecture. All items requested by the Planning Commission were provided, enabling the Commission to make a knowledgeable decision. I, the review of the environmental impact is a separate action from the site plan review. Denial of site plan review has no bearing on the adequacy of the environmental review process. Consultants prepared all of the environmental studies for the project. The applicant prepared none of the studies. J, the environmental document is adequate for this project. Cultural, historical, biological, and water resource studies have been provided, and mitigation measures are in place to assure that, if necessary, further review and studies are required prior to issuance of the building or grading permit. Okay. It was being asked that on-site traffic safety studies be done. And I asked why should this be done? This is something I've never heard of before. I've been developing apartments for 16 years, and I've never been asked to provide such a study, so I'm a little more curious than anything. Are there accident reports or any other information that supports such an on-site traffic study analysis? Site distance mitigation measures from the April 25th, 2001 Caltrans letter was incorporated in the mitigating negative declaration. L, we have agreed to make off-site infrastructure improvements required by the city. Such improvements will correct existing problems that will be beneficial to the community for many years. M, traffic impact on Broad Pine Street intersection was adequately addressed in a traffic report submitted to staff and discussed regarding the project's potential impact on the intersection, was explained by the traffic engineer to the Planning Commission prior to the approval of the mitigated negative declaration. Cultural and historical significance. Historical value of the site has been determined in a report submitted to the staff by a cultural resource consultant. The report reflects the historic value of the site to be minimal. There is little evidence that a historic act took place at the site. Mitigation measures assure that areas of the hillside will be preserved and interpretive signage will be provided for public information. But basically, the way that it was explained to me that the value of historical sites has a great deal to do with what is left to be viewed. Well, in essence, what's left to be viewed here is a torn away hillside. And to that effect, there is no equipment, there is no foundations, there are no structures evident or existing that has any historical relevance. We all agree that a historic act took place at this site. And we agree, as in the mitigation measures, to preserve the hillside by clearing out the brush, leaving an interpretive sign, leaving an area for the public to view and walk up to the site if they choose to. So we agree to all of those conditions. Water and sewer. Mitigation measures have been provided for sewer service issues. We have maintained that we are willing to work with the city on needed improvements to infrastructure impact caused by our project. Whether or not there are hazards associated with the on-site contamination will be determined prior to issuance of the grading permit. The potential impact from the closed city burn dump and the possible presence of asbestos on the site will also be determined prior to issuance of the grading permit. Wildlife impact was discussed and analyzed. The site is essentially the final piece of land to be developed. The site is essentially surrounded by existing or planned development improvements. Habitat patterns have been adjusted to the development in the area of the site and will adjust to our development as well. There is no known critical habitat existing on the site. And adequate provisions have been made in the approved mitigated negative declaration to ensure full environmental clearance of all identified project impacts. In summation, the mitigated negative declaration has several conditions that must be met prior to issuance of a grading permit. The project is consistent with the general plan and the scenic corridor regulations. In conclusion, I feel that we've been involved in this proposal since last summer. We made initial applications in October. We paid initial fees at that time. We had numerous staff meetings. We've had several ARC meetings. It wasn't until the April 6th ARC meeting that the city engineer indicated to us that our grading plan was unacceptable. It was at that time that the modifications to that grading plan were made, and a more stepped approach was adopted. And it was at that time that the retaining walls were the majority, or more retaining walls, I should say, was added to the plan. April 6th is a long time from October 23rd when we made this initial application. It's a bit frustrating to find out that you have to make those kind of adjustments so late in the process, but we did, and we have addressed those issues, and we've responded to everything that staff has asked us.
I never attended the April 6th meeting.
Well, nevertheless, our plan, our submittal, and our documentation have been with the city up until April 6th, and also on the May 10th submittal, in reference to the different size of the plans, we had submitted the site plan on the 7th, and we had provided what was requested of us in the size of the plans. The reductions were provided so that the planning commissioners could have that size in front of them to view during the meeting, rather than having the big 24 by 36, each of you pulling it out. It was a convenience. It was not a trick. It was not trying to conceal anything. The whole purpose was to show that the modifications could be made and that we could remove the buildings from the setbacks. We thought it was a good thing. Had I known it was going to create such an uproar, we would have left it alone. Everything we've done throughout this process has been a good thing to try and make this a better project. We've modified the building elevations. We consulted with local architects. We think that we've come up with a better plan. And every time staff mentions something or brings something up, we address it and we respond to it. As far as the mitigating negative declaration, there are still items in here that shouldn't be in here. I understand council's review. I don't know why there are conditions in here to pay a fee related to annexations. I think a lot of this could be cleaned up. I think this mitigated negative declaration, we could sit here in the next couple nights and we can go through every item and we can correct it and we can make the proper findings to approve this project. And I think we would certainly appreciate that. I mean, we think that we've done a lot. We've certainly, addressed just about every concern. And if there are concerns that we haven't addressed, let us know. We'll address them still. But we would appreciate the cooperation and making the proper findings to this document so that you can make the right decision.
Bill, I have a question. We need to clarify this, but we don't want anybody leaving here with any bad impressions about the process. You indicated that you were advised by the city engineer on April 6th that the grading plan was unacceptable. The city engineers indicated he wasn't at the meeting on April 6th. Can we resolve, when did you, Bill, indicate to Mr. Spann that his grading plan was unacceptable?
Grading plan was dated April 13th, so I don't think it existed on the 6th. Or we didn't have it.
Well, it even narrows it down even further, but do you recall, Bill, when you advised Mr. Spann that the grading plan was unacceptable?
I don't recall that date. I know that the one we're talking about, the first one I saw.
people mix up the site plan and the grading plan. We had a site plan, we did not
Right.
have grading.
I'm just trying to get, Mr. Span has indicated that that the advice from staff that the grading plan was unacceptable came late in the process. And so I'm just trying to determine when did it arise? How late in the process?
We had, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, my name is Gary Horn, I'm the civil engineer for the project. We did have comments at the ARC meeting regarding the grading plan. One of the comments was that there was too much dirt being moved, that the initial grading plan that we did that was considered at the ARC meeting had a volume of about 50,000 yards of excavation. And we received the comments at the ARC meeting. We went back and revised some aspects of the site plan. We also revised the grading plan and resubmitted those for Planning Commission. The second grading plan showed a yardage of about 18,000 cubic yards of dirt to be moved. The last minute changes to the site plan, and I agree they were made the week before the Planning Commission hearing to mitigate the encroachments into the stream setbacks, were sent to the city with the full intention on our part for them to be in the package to the Planning Commissioners. At that time, we did not revise the grading plan to reflect those minor movements. So we have tried to respond to all of the comments and to address those and do the best we can to meet staff concerns. So that's my recollection of the history.
And I kind of skipped over, responses to Mr. Pemberton's appeal, and perhaps I'd just take a couple minutes to explain my position in some of those issues. Dating back to last summer, I did approach the city manager about requesting to ask the city to work with us on making a home application. And in moving forward with that thought, I started working with Mr. Cogley from a planning standpoint, researching the property, determining whether or not it would be suitable for our plans. And in that process, I explained that in order for the city, if the city were to be interested in making the home application with us, it would require, not require, but it would improve our competitive score in the home competition if the housing element was in substantive compliance. And this is where I admit an error in judgment in my zeal and exuberance to see this happen. I felt that this is a good thing for the city, and I took it upon myself to engage a consultant in reviewing the housing element. Now, this was done in some cooperation with staff, because I did receive the documents from staff. But in hindsight, I wish I never would have done that. But facts are, I did take that on. With regards to the revitalization zone, I did approach staff. I did approach Paul Cogley and asked him if he would be interested in working with me in creating a revitalization zone to present to the city. Knowing that Mr. Cogley worked part-time for the city, knowing that he had an extensive background and understanding of the city's makeup, I felt who better than he to write a revitalization zone or work on it. My intention was not to do anything devious. It was simply because he was, in my opinion, the best person for doing that kind of work.
No,
we missed the last, on whether we were just saying it's
All right.
going down.
We're back online.
Yeah.
Mr. Cogley was kind enough to quickly tell me that it just wasn't appropriate, so it stopped there. And, but to explain, the reason for the request to form a revitalization zone had everything to do with improving our competition for tax credits. It had nothing to do with the home program or the housing element, but yet it was another segment, another competition that we were seeking to finance the project. And I apologize if it's caused Mr. Cogley any problems, and I just want to express to Mr. Pemberton it is by no means an intent to try and sway votes in any way, shape, or form. It had everything to do with trying to improve our chances of seeking financing. Great. That's about it.
Thank you very much. Jim?
Mr. Arnett, can I ask one question from Paul? Just clarification, it's just the CEQA section that you quoted, 15048?
Jim, question for you. You given us the legal counsel's opinion earlier this evening. Question that I had was, is the council able to take a vote at any time prior to Wednesday evening on any issue, or?
Yes, I think that legally, given the advice you received, that if you wanted to go in that direction, you could go there at any time.
Just on that item, or?
Yeah, I think on that item, that yes, that because of the advice we received, if the council at some point wanted to feel that they've had enough input and wanted to follow the advice, that they said to do that and not need to go into a full public hearing if that's what you want to do. Because if we do have further environmental impact reports done or environmental studies done, the whole matter will come back up before the council, assuming that the applicant wants to go forward, we'll all come back and we'll do this all over again probably. So it's not like you won't get a chance to say something at some point. Plus, as I understand it, if the consultant was hired, I would assume he or she would get input from the public before coming back with a report to the council.
Okay, well, I guess I just want clarification on the point that if, and just throw this out as a what if sometime before the end of Wednesday's meeting, the council feels that it's prepared to make a vote on something other than the CEQA, is that allowable, or do we need to wait until the end of the?
I think for any other motion, in other words, if you're going to approve or deny the project itself, I think you need to get the public input, because that would conceivably be a final result where they wouldn't get a chance to speak again, versus if you go back and all we're going to do is review the environmental impacts, everybody's going to get a chance to speak again, in the sense it'll be, the consultant will take testimony, will go out to the ERC, which will be notified when it gets a chance to speak, and then presumably the project will go to the planning commission, and perhaps another appeal. So everybody would have their day in court, so to speak. But if you decide to approve the project or deny the project before you get public input, that's basically the end of it. People didn't have a chance to get their input before that was done.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Then, seems that we're finished for this evening, and like who wants to be a millionaire, we're on 3 nights this week, so we will see you again tomorrow evening at 6:30. Thank you very much.
this